Guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a model showcase for you guys, and this is of a modified Proto 2000 New York Central 080. Basically what I did was I did some modifications in the front area to make it look like a slightly different class. Basically I made a ex Boston and Albany U3b class New York Central 080. And yeah, so it looks very, I don't know if you guys recognize the usual USRA 080 look, but usually the headlight's mounted on top, and I had modified it to have the headlight brought down. So I was gonna just basically show you guys the model as well as a few pictures of stuff I did along the way, and kind of explain the workflow I did in case anyone else wanted to recreate these modifications on their own engines for, you know, their own aeros or whatever you want to do. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. To begin with a little bit of history, the U3Bs, so the New York Central had a lot of 080s. They were one of the largest purchasers of the USRA 080, and they originally were the U3A class. And I believe Boston and Albany basically had a whole bunch of the 080s as well. The Boston and Albany being, of course, a subsidiary of the New York Central. They had a bunch of, they called their 080s the U3Bs, and they had the center-mounted headlight. Now, it was just a cylinder, cylinder can style, not the POW style you see here. But historically, you know, they looked a lot like this, except it would be the Boston and Albany lettering instead of the New York Central. But yeah, it looked a lot like this. As you can see, it has a smaller than usual, can style headlight in the front, center-mounted, not mounted on top, as well as a few other modifications, such as these overfire jets, which I haven't added to my model yet. I just need to buy some. They're very common in brass. I just need to buy a few brass parts and put them on my own model yet, but I haven't done that yet. But basically, they look like this. And a few of them, notably 7722 and 7725, they were brought back to the New York Central, the main New York, the regular New York Central, and repainted in the NYC scheme or lettering, later in their lives, and possibly a few other road numbers received a similar treatment. But at the very least, I can confirm at least 2 engines with those numbers who did get this. But yeah, it was pretty uncommon to see a New York Central 080 with the center-mounted headlight. Usually, New York Central subsidiaries were the Boston and Albany, also the IHB, which is the Indiana Harbor Belt. Sorry, they also had center-mounted headlights, but it was rare to see one lettered for New York Central and still have the center-mounted headlight. Anyways, I really like the look of it, but I didn't want to have a Boston and Albany or IHB engine, because I do model New York Central, and I prefer to have all my engines have the New York Central logo. And so I wanted to, recreate one of these relatively uncommon engines. So I started with a Proto 2000 engine. It's like the most common 080 you can buy. You can buy an Akane brass, or obviously more expensive brass, but as you know, I try to model, I try to be in this hobby on a budget, so I try to find the cheapest way of getting what I want, while also not sacrificing detail, right? So in my case, the Proto 2000 080 is one of the most highly recommended engines from me, and definitely the best 080 in my opinion, which you can buy, just because they're pretty affordable and they're a great design. They're really detailed and they run really well and everything. So started with a New York Central Pro 2000 engine, which I paid $100 for at a train show. This did come with the factory installed QSI sound. It still has that sound encoder. I haven't bothered replacing it yet, because I honestly don't really mind QSI sound. But maybe one day I'll replace it with the ESU. It's really not that hard. You just gotta, redo some of the wiring, the tender, but the speakers and everything already underneath the engine. So yeah, I figured that was an easy way to start. It does say U3A on the cab there, so that's something I could change in the future, but it does not bother me that much, honestly. And it's a real pain in the ass to have to remove that and redo it. So I'm just gonna leave it as is. I'll live with it, use a little bit of my modeler license. But yeah, anyways, so the main thing I wanted to do was basically lower the headlight. The stock headlight, which looked like this, was too oversized. If I placed it, down below, it would look absolutely massive, and didn't look right. So and also you can see this this headlight bracket here is really thick and chunky, and that's actually because the you know, the clear plastic, the headlight LED light goes through that running the headlight bracket to reach the headlight. That's why these are really dim, but also that's why I had to make the headlight bracket so thick. And so this just didn't look right, and so I wanted to replace it. Now, what did I replace it with? Well, nobody really makes the, you know, the smaller than normal headlights, which these engines had. In general, HO scale headlights are kind of oversized, especially like Broadway Limited engines, which have notoriously oversized headlights to fit that LED. So I went to my parts bin, my scrap bin, and the brass options were slightly better. There was some, you know, smaller sized headlights, but ultimately I actually ended up with using a headlight which I removed from a BLI Hudson, the New York Central Hudson. If you guys didn't see my other video, I actually modified my two BLI Hudsons because they actually used undersized headlights. So Broadway Limited Imports, I think they undersized their headlights a little too much, and they look kind of wrong. So I actually replaced those undersized headlights with regular sized, you know, pile style headlights. And I kept these. I'm really glad I did, because this undersized headlight works perfectly on this engine. Again, it is slightly the wrong kind. This is the pile style and not the normal can style, but it looks good enough, honestly. So anyways, I put that on the onto the boiler, and also took a Kale Scale headlight bracket, which is obviously too big for this headlight. It looks really weird to have a small headlight on a big bracket, so I also sanded that down, made it basically less narrow, and, you know, all that stuff. And eventually I was able to mount it onto the onto the front, of course. I also had to deal with the big gaping hole now, as you can see here, where the original headlight and headlight bracket stood. So I filled it in by just using some putty. As you can see here, this is everything installed. That putty took a while. I ended up using Tamiya putty. Squadron went out of business, and I've had some pretty bad luck with Squadron products, so I ended up choosing to use a new style, which is Tamiya. Turned out really, really well. Just had to you know, fill it in and carefully sand away. I also ran into the problem of, you know, the Pro 2000 didn't model the rivets in the very top, because that's where the headlight used to stand. So I had to find a way to kind of conceal that. And so what I did next was basically I drilled some holes. Instead of adding protruding rivets, I realized that, you know, having no rivets looks the worst in my opinion. So my solution was to just drill holes to mimic rivets. And this, obviously, while not a perfect solution, I think looks a whole lot better than having no rivets at all. As you can see here, especially from the front view, you know, the rivets are pretty noticeable. Let me take my camera out of the tripod real quick. Again, it's not a perfect solution, but it looks a whole lot better than having nothing there. And yeah, I don't trust myself personally in making, you know, manufacturing my own rivets. I'd probably just be using like wire inserted into each hole and then cutting it, but I don't think that would look really good. And so this is kind of an easy in-between solution. And yeah, so that was pretty much it with the detailing. Next up was painting, of course. So I took everything. So obviously I want to keep a whole lot of details black, like all the handrails and whatnot. So I basically took as much of the stuff off as I could, and also flared out these you know, engine side handrails to mask them all. I also tried using some liquid mask, which I used for the first time. It's like micro mask. Also Tamiya liquid masking tape works well too, but it's basically like a liquid thing you just apply, and then you could peel it off afterwards, like a masking tape. And you can see a little bit how that's a little bit blue. That's actually what that's from. In fact, here's what it looks like. So I put some liquid mask and I painted everything silver, and you can see the builder's plate comes right back off. So really easy to use. And actually, I'm really excited I was able to try it and it worked out so well. So I'm really happy about that. I'll definitely be using that more in the future. But anyways, for the rest, I just kind of masked it all up with some Tamiya masking tape and some regular painter's tape. And then it's just a normal priming process, and then painting everything black. And then I used Alclad 2. I think I used magnesium color on top. I think it did come out a little bit brighter than I'd like. I usually like it a little darker. I think New York Central used a much darker graphite, so this is a little too light for my taste, but honestly, it looks good enough for me, and I can always weather it in the future. But it was really important to paint everything silver, because there's no way I could ever paint match. If I just painted the smoke box front, I would never be able to paint match that with the stock Pro 2000 smoke box sides. So I had to take the shell off and paint both things so it matches. One thing is Alclad 2, it highly recommends you paint Alclad 2 over a glossy black surface. So actually after the primer, before the Alclad 2, I painted everything a gloss black. I used Tamiya lacquer. I'm trying to use Tamiya products for the first time because Scale Coat's out of business now, so it's hard to find. Seems like I need to find a new paint manufacturer every few weeks, because another one goes out of business. So anyways, and after that you just reassemble it. I didn't show this in the thing, but I did install an SMD LED. Obviously, now that the light can't come out of the top, I drilled a hole through it and basically put a tiny little 0402 SMD LED. They look like this. They're absolutely tiny inside there, and glued it in place, of course, and then put the BLI lens cover back onto the headlight. And that was that. I just wired the LED back to where the old headlight wires used to go, and that was pretty much it. So this engine, at least the front part, this major part, is complete. There are some other things I want to do, such as adding those overfire jets, as I mentioned, which the U3Bs and the U3Cs, I believe, had. Also painting the wheel axles and the wheel tires. And I don't know, maybe redoing this cab locomotive class identifier. But otherwise, this is basically complete. This is like most of the hard work out of the way. The rest of stuff's gonna be really, really easy. The overfire jets I could just hand paint. I don't need to airbrush anything anymore, thankfully. Because as much as I like the results of airbrushing, it is a pain in the ass, and I'd try to avoid doing that as much as possible. So yeah. Anyways, I think it turned out really, really good looking. I think it looks really nice, and I have a really unique looking piece now. I did, damage a few detail parts along the way. Like, I think when you pull out these detail parts, there's a chance that when you pull them out, because they're glued from the factory, you won't be able to pull it all out and reassemble it properly. But for the most part, I was pretty successful. But when I, pulled some of the black detail parts out before painting, I inevitably snapped a few. So like this part is loose now, but that's okay. Again, it's really, really minor. And honestly, I'm not really gonna rough handle this anyway, so it's not gonna be a problem. But yeah, that's the only thing, that's the only kind of hiccup along the way. But otherwise, I think it turned out really, really well, and I think it looks great. I'm really happy about how it turned out. And as I said, I just need to add a few more details here and there, and it'll be pretty much done. But yeah, anyways, I just wanted to share this with you guys, just because I think it looks really cool. And now that I have two of these, now I have the stock Pro 2000 080, and now I have, this modified one. I can now double head them, just like how New York Central did historically. They often double headed 080s. They just had so many of them, they ended up just using it everywhere. So if there's a long train, they just use two in the yards. But yeah, now that I have two, I'm glad that I have two, but they don't look identical. I don't really see the point in ever owning two engines that are completely identical. I try to add as much variation as possible. So like, for example, my 10 or so K4s, each of them I plan to modify just a little bit, which will be really interesting. But in this case, now I got two very unique New York Central 080s, and yeah, this is a really fun project overall. I thought it went really smooth, very few hiccups along the way, and yeah, very happy with how it turned out, as I said. So anyways, that's pretty much it. If you guys do want to recreate this or have any questions or comments, please comment down below. I will try my best to answer all of them. But that is pretty much it from me. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys learned something maybe, or at least enjoyed the video. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Take care.